Or is this, what is that based on? Why are some people choosing one thing and others the other?
Why do you choose what you do and why do others choose what they do? It's personal preference. It's what you believe you need for your own growth, for your own experience. There's no other outside preference that determines this. It's always up to you to determine what it is you believe you need next.
Okay. And you've said that angels are the first reflection of all that is. Does that mean on a very high level that we as individuals contain the consciousness of the angels?
Yes, and you are contained in the consciousness of angels.
And one person was asking about interacting with all that is, like, do we have a different experience of all that is than the Essassani beings do? And same thing for angels. Do they have a completely different perspective of all that is than we do?
I would think that would be relatively self-evident. Of course
Right.
they do, because they're on a different level and see things in different ways.
So how about for your society, the way that you experience all that is versus us as humans at our level?
Well, as we said, our daily experience is as if walking through different dimensions, as if dreaming while awake. We experience multiple realities simultaneously and can keep it all in order, because that's the way we function at this particular point in our evolutionary space. So it's similar to the idea of recognizing that there may be different levels or representations or collectives that exist that might represent oversouls and angels and what have you. And we interact with them according to the synchronism in our society that determines when and where it's appropriate to do so. But we still experience most everything as a kind of dreamlike collective that allows us to extract whatever information we require at that moment as individuals from the collective that we're interacting with.
And this person here is saying that I'm amazed by you as quasi-physical beings being able to keep a balance between the conscious energy state and a persona state. So by following your teachings, I had an experience that is beyond the best thing my mind could ever imagine. And I'm curious, how do you balance the two states so well? Once I'm in a state of love, it is very challenging for me to use the perspective of my ego. Does this make sense to you?
Yes. Well, the simple answer is practice, like anything. The more you do it, the better you get at it. Our civilization at this point in its evolutionary path has been doing it for so long that it's actually more of a challenge for us to not do that, to not be in that state of balance. We actually have to really try hard to get out of balance at this point, because there's a momentum, there's an inertia to the idea of something you do over and over and over again. But don't necessarily judge the ego itself as negative. You can maintain the idea of a persona, which is all the ego is, keeping you focused in physical reality, and still experience the great connections and balance of unconditional love of all that is through the interpretation that is appropriate for physical reality. So it's not about getting rid of the ego, it's about allowing the ego to simply act as a conduit in the way that's appropriate for the physical ego to do so, to experience unconditional love and connection of everything in life, in physical terms.
And this person is saying, I love ETs like crazy. I talk about ETs all day. It's my total passion. I feel my heart is expanded a lot and I feel such deep love. Why do I love ETs? What's going on?
Well, again, you recognize the connection to other selves, other parallel realities that your greater consciousness is connected to. It's also an expression of self-love, that you're willing to open up to more of yourself in that way. And more of your total self will contain the idea of extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional expressions of consciousness, just as it contains expressions of spirit as well. So you're just connecting to more of yourself and falling in love with yourself in different ways.
Okay. And this person was saying you've mentioned that diseases are caused by distorted beliefs. I don't think you used the word distorted, but that's
No,
the one they
but
use.
fear-based, negative, yes.
And they're saying that when they were 3 years old, they got tuberculosis and they almost died.
Yes.
What beliefs could I have had at that time that would give me such a disease? Was it infectious, like tuberculosis, something that I wanted to experience, or is it just a disease?
Well, first and foremost, this is a multi-layered question. Remember that souls can actually come into physical reality with a theme of exploration already at hand. That can represent the idea or stand in for the concept of having beliefs that will cause certain things to happen so that they can fulfill the theme of their exploration. Even a child, even at birth, will start to absorb whatever beliefs are in that society that will serve them in creating that theme, that experience that they have decided to explore, not only for their own purposes, but perhaps even for other people's purposes around them. Sometimes souls will choose to experience a disease at a young age, not just because of what it might do for their own experience as a soul, but what it might actually cause other people to choose to do that are surrounding that particular child that has the disease. In other words, what are you and others learning they otherwise wouldn't have learned if the child didn't have the disease? So there can be many reasons for this. It's not necessarily about the idea of the child having enough experience to have chosen or absorbed those beliefs through the idea of living, but just absorbing them telepathically for the idea of constructing whatever experience they need to construct in order to play out the theme that they chose to assist themselves and others.
And does the replacement of a damaged human body organ with machine parts mean spiritual degeneration? And will human beings take the road of being half human and half machine in the future?
It does not deteriorate the spirit. Again, as long as consciousness has an appropriate vehicle to express itself through in its fullness of being, there is no idea of degeneration. The idea of being human doesn't necessarily mean that you cannot have what you would call artificial machine parts. It's all about the collective whole of what expression is capable coming through the idea of an organic or a synthetic particular construct. So it's really all about the ability of those parts still allowing for the fullest expression of the consciousness that would be there even if the being was wholly organic. Remember, even organics are a different form of construction, a different form of machine. The materials are not so much the issue as it is what the materials are capable of allowing the consciousness to express. You can have a fully synthetic being that expresses full consciousness. Is that being human? It depends on what you refer to as human. But is it a full expression of consciousness like any other conscious being? Yes, it can be. And therefore it may be irrelevant as to whether it's technically human or not.
Okay, and can you help us understand a little more about the idea of eating meat and plants on this planet and whether or not the negative effects that are caused by eating meat on our environment indicates that in order to be a more evolved being, you need to give that up, or is it actually necessary for us at this stage in development?
Again, a very generalized question, still based on the idea that it's important to look at every individual and what they truly need. Some individuals may still require the absorption of meat protein. Many may not. And yes, in general, it's usually representative of a higher vibration to eat things that, in your terms, are less dense or created through more negative means, which can create a more negative vibration in those substances. But again, if you allow yourself to go back to a more natural way of absorbing the meat protein in terms of how the meat protein is collected, how the respect is given, how the exchange happens in a more natural, original, organic way, then individuals that may require meat protein can absorb it without the idea of the negative concept behind how it was raised or how it was caught or how it was killed. But again, yes, in general, humans are evolving to the point where you may find simply no desire and no need anymore to absorb more dense substances and can subsist quite readily on some of the less dense substances. And even the idea of meat protein is still more about the plants, because really you're getting what you need from the plants that the animal ate, more than you are from the meat itself, which is really functioning more as a carrier for the substances that they ate that are passed on to you when you consume them.
So the fact that in our society now, we're starting to be able to do things like grow meat in laboratories so that we don't have to kill animals in order to eat that. And taking that along with the idea that isn't one of the attractions of coming to Earth and having this very physical experience, part of the attraction of being here, the dining experience, so to speak, seems to be very attractive to perhaps be. But are beings in spirit, can they also experience eating and dining and doing all that?
They can, but most of them simply find it unnecessary. If they wish to have an experience, they can create it instantaneously. But the idea is it's not quite the same as physical reality. There are different levels of pleasures to it, and some may even be greater than what you experience in physical reality. But again, most usually let go of that and simply create environments that they may enjoy that are similar, but not necessarily requiring them to seem to be ingesting anything in order to experience and get out of that environment the same thing they might have gotten out of eating in restaurants when they were physically alive.
And so these...
But one moment. The idea of creating meats artificially can be a step in the direction of the evolution, but you're going to find ultimately that will probably be unnecessary. Because again, more of you may gravitate towards simply eating natural foods that are grown naturally, that are given from the earth naturally, and most of that will most likely ultimately be plant material. You will simply not need the idea of artificial meat eventually, but it can be part of a weaning process if you wish.
But isn't it, it's not really artificial meat because it is exact, they use the cells in a
artificially constructed
meat. Okay. So, but it's a good intermediary step, yes?
It can be. It depends on the person.
Okay. All right. And lastly, there's an indication that there seems to be an intensification of the splitting prisms phenomenon.
Oh, yes.
Why is this, and how will it transform? And is this the beginning of the end of this stage, or will it just continue intensifying as we go forward?
It will intensify to a certain point, but beyond that, it will only intensify in realities that require it to intensify. The idea is that, again, as the splitting prism continues, those that will be navigating themselves toward versions of Earth that no longer require the same kind of intensity in their experience will no longer experience it, even though there may be versions where the intensity does grow and continue because it's leading down a different kind of a path. So there will be a point at which the intensity in that sense will diminish for those that go to certain versions, and it will continue to grow for those that choose other pathways.
Okay, thank you. And thank you so much for all the information and your sharing, and we really appreciate you. Thank you, Bashar.
It is our passion and our pleasure and our deepest appreciation to all of you for the power and strength that you show and demonstrate every single day in making the choices that are true for you and being a living example of the choices that others could choose, but also having the strength and wisdom to allow them to choose their path, no matter how different it may be from yours, because in the end, all come home. Now, please allow yourselves to relax and enjoy your meditative exercise.